This one tree feeds you, powers your home, and cleans water. Why no one talks about it? There is a tree that grows so fast it can reach up to 15 feet in a single year. At first glance, it looks ordinary. Thin branches, soft green leaves, nothing that would make you stop and stare. But hidden inside that simplicity is something almost impossible. Press its seeds, and you get oil that can burn inside a diesel engine. Eat its leaves, and your body absorbs more nutrients than most modern diets provide. Crush those same seeds, drop them into dirty water, and within minutes, the water begins to clear. One tree, not one purpose, 3. Fuel, food, medicine. For thousands of years, this wasn't considered extraordinary. It was just part of life. Entire communities relied on it without calling it a superfood, without branding it, without selling it, because they didn't need to. The tree gave everything freely. It grew where other crops failed. It survived when rain disappeared. It produced when the land seemed empty. And then, somehow, it faded from global awareness. Not because it stopped working, but because the world chose something else.
Long before modern science could explain nutrients, proteins, or bacteria, people already understood something far more important: what kept them alive. Nearly 4,000 years ago, in the dry regions of northern India, where heat cracked the soil and crops often failed, one tree continued to grow without struggle. They called it shigru. While other plants withered under drought, this tree remained green. Its leaves were harvested daily, its pods cooked into meals, and its seeds pressed into oil for light and nourishment. Nothing was wasted. But its true value revealed itself during the hardest times. When rivers slowed and wells turned muddy, water became dangerous. Drinking it meant risking disease, infection, even death. And yet, these communities had a method: simple, repeatable, and astonishingly effective. They took the seeds of this tree, crushed them into powder, and stirred them into contaminated water stored in clay pots. Then they waited. 30 minutes later, something remarkable happened. The dirt settled, the water cleared, the smell faded. What they couldn't see was even more important. Bacteria were being neutralized, clumping together and sinking to the bottom. They didn't know the word protein binding. They didn't understand microbiology, but they understood results. In a world without filtration systems, without chemicals, without infrastructure, this tree quietly protected entire communities from waterborne disease. It didn't need technology. It was the technology.
What began as survival in one region did not stay there. The knowledge moved, slowly at first, carried by travelers, traders, healers, then farther, across deserts, across oceans, across empires. By 600 BCE, ancient practitioners of Ayurveda were already documenting the tree's effects. They didn't describe it as a simple plant. They described it as a remedy for hundreds of conditions, an entire system of healing growing from the ground. And word spread. Merchants transported it beyond India's borders. In Egypt, its oil became prized, not just for cooking, but for its stability. It didn't spoil easily. It didn't turn rancid. It lasted. The Romans began importing it, willing to pay premium prices for something that could endure long journeys without losing its quality. Along the Silk Road, Arab traders carried its seeds across continents. From there, it reached Africa, where its importance grew even deeper. Across the Sahel region, where drought defines life and survival is never guaranteed, this tree found a new home. And once again, it did what it had always done. It thrived where others failed. Communities planted it not because it was exotic, but because it was reliable. Every part of the tree served a purpose. The roots, sharp and spicy, used like horseradish. The flowers, delicate but edible, added to meals. The young pods, soft and nutritious, cooked into daily dishes. The leaves, dense with nutrients, harvested again and again. The seeds, rich in oil, pressed for energy and use. This wasn't just agriculture. It was independence. A single tree could support a family. A grove could support a village. No supply chains, no imports, no dependency. Just knowledge, passed from one generation to the next. And for centuries, that was enough. the hidden biology behind the miracle. For thousands of years, people used this tree without understanding why it worked. Now, science does. And what it reveals is not magic, it's precision engineering by nature. The leaves, a biological nutrient factory. Moringa leaves are not just nutritious, they are structurally optimized for survival, and that's exactly why they're so powerful for humans. Inside each leaf, dense chloroplast activity, extremely high photosynthesis efficiency, high protein synthesis rate, unusual for a plant, rich micronutrient storage, especially calcium, iron, and vitamins. Unlike many plants that prioritize growth speed or defense, moringa does something different. It prioritizes nutrient density per gram. That's why small amounts deliver disproportionately high nutrition. It's not just food, it's concentrated survival chemistry. The seeds, natural water purification system. This is where things become truly fascinating. Moringa seeds contain special cationic proteins, positively charged molecules. Dirty water contains negatively charged particles, clay, bacteria, organic matter. When crushed moringa seeds are added to water, opposites attract. The positively charged proteins bind to negatively charged contaminants. This triggers a process called coagulation plus flocculation. Particles clump together, become heavier, sink to the bottom. The result? Clearer water, reduced bacterial load, less turbidity. Nature created a biological filtration system without filters. The seeds, again, oil for energy. The same seeds contain 30 to 40.
How a tree becomes fuel, the science behind plant-based energy. If moringa seems powerful as food and medicine, its role as energy is where things become even more intriguing. Because this is where biology meets physics. At its core, all fuel, whether oil, gas, or coal, comes from one source: stored solar energy. Plants capture sunlight through photosynthesis and convert it into chemical energy. That energy is stored in sugars, starches, oils. Moringa takes this a step further. Instead of storing mostly carbohydrates like many crops, it stores a significant portion of energy as lipids, oils, which are far more energy-dense. Not all plant energy is equal. Carbohydrates, quick energy, low density. Oils, slow burning, high density. Moringa seeds contain up to 40% oil by weight, making them highly efficient energy carriers. Why is this important? Because diesel engines require high energy density, stable combustion, consistent burn rate. And plant oils can provide exactly that under the right conditions. The diesel engine, invented by Rudolf Diesel, was originally designed with flexibility in mind. Instead of spark ignition, diesel engines use compression ignition. Air is compressed to high pressure. Fuel is injected. Heat from compression ignites the fuel. This system allows a wider range of fuels to work, including certain vegetable oils. When moringa oil is used, it atomizes, breaks into small droplets, mixes with hot compressed air, ignites and releases energy. This drives pistons, just like petroleum diesel. While plant oils can run diesel engines, there are constraints. Higher viscosity, thicker than diesel, can cause carbon buildup over time. Requires filtration or conversion, biodiesel processing, for long-term use. So the idea is not that moringa replaces oil instantly. It's that it proves fuel doesn't have to come from underground. Compared to many plant oils, moringa oil has advantages. High oleic acid content, about 70%. Better oxidative stability, longer shelf life, cleaner burn characteristics. This makes it more suitable for small-scale energy use, rural or off-grid systems, localized fuel production. This is where the real significance appears. There are two fundamentally different energy models: extracted in specific locations, refined in large facilities, distributed globally, requires infrastructure, grown locally, processed simply, used near source, scales through communities. Moringa fits into the second model, not because it's more powerful, but because it's more distributed. Moringa doesn't replace oil. It challenges a deeper assumption.
that energy must come from centralized industrial systems. Instead, it shows energy can be grown, stored in seeds, used locally. It turns fuel from a commodity into a possibility.
How one tree rebuilds soil, food, and survival systems. If moringa's power stopped at nutrition or fuel, it would already be impressive. But its deepest strength lies somewhere else. It doesn't just survive in an ecosystem, it improves it. Most modern crops take from the soil. Moringa does something different. It gives back. Its leaves fall continuously, decomposing into organic matter. This process adds nutrients back into the soil, improves soil structure, increases microbial activity. Over time, poor soil becomes richer, darker, and more fertile. But there's more. Moringa contributes to nitrogen cycling, supporting the growth of surrounding plants. While not a classic nitrogen-fixing plant like legumes, it still enhances soil ecosystems through organic input and root interactions. The result, land that was once unproductive begins to recover. Moringa is engineered for scarcity. Its system includes deep taproots that reach underground moisture, reduced leaf surface during extreme drought, efficient water retention. Unlike water-intensive crops, moringa produces more biomass per drop of water. This makes it ideal for arid regions, climate-stressed environments, areas with unreliable rainfall. Most crops follow a cycle: plant, grow, harvest, die. Moringa breaks that cycle. Leaves can be harvested weekly, the tree continues growing. No need for replanting. This creates a permanent food source, not a seasonal one. Communities don't just harvest once, they harvest continuously. Every part of the tree has a function. Leaves, human nutrition. Seeds, oil plus water purification. Seed cake, animal feed. Branches, fuel or mulch. Roots, medicinal or culinary use. Nothing is discarded. This is what ecologists call closed-loop resource efficiency. Modern systems try to achieve this. Moringa already does. Here's the deeper principle. Industrial agriculture depends on fertilizers, irrigation systems, machinery, external inputs. Moringa depends on time, sunlight, and minimal care. This difference creates two outcomes. Industrial model, high yield, high dependency, high risk if supply chains fail. Moringa model, moderate yield, low dependency, high resilience. Scalability in a different way. Moringa doesn't scale like factories. It scales like nature, tree by tree, village by village, region by region. This is slower, but more stable. Instead of centralizing production, it distributes it. The real insight. Moringa is not just a plant. It's a system embedded in biology. Restores soil, produces food continuously, provides energy potential, purifies water, requires minimal inputs. It doesn't maximize profit. It maximizes self-sufficiency. And that is what makes it fundamentally different from most modern systems.
Why a tree like this doesn't dominate the world? At this point, the question is no longer what moringa can do. The real question is, if it works so well, why isn't it everywhere? To answer that, you have to step beyond biology and look at systems. Two types of value: abundance versus control. Moringa creates abundance, grows quickly, reproduces easily, requires minimal input, can be used directly by individuals. This kind of value is open, local, and difficult to control. Now compare that to industrial systems. They create controlled value: centralized production, complex supply chains, dependence on infrastructure, continuous consumption. This kind of value is scalable, monetizable, and controllable. Why systems favor dependency? Large-scale systems, energy, agriculture, water, are built around predictability, standardization, profit models. For something to be adopted globally, it must fit into existing infrastructure, generate repeat economic activity, be measurable and scalable. Moringa challenges all three, because once planted, it keeps producing. It reduces the need for external inputs. It shifts power to the local level, and systems are not designed for that. The economics of repeat need. Modern industries rely on one key principle: you must need them again tomorrow. Fuel runs out, you buy more. Fertilizer depletes, you buy more. Infrastructure ages, you invest again. This creates continuous economic flow. Moringa disrupts that model because you plant once. You harvest for years. You reduce external dependency. It doesn't eliminate markets, but it reduces frequency of consumption. Local solutions versus global systems. Moringa is inherently local, adoptable, decentralized. Global systems are standardized, centralized, uniform. This creates friction. A solution that works differently in every region is harder to integrate into a global model. Perception plays a role. There's another layer, psychological. People tend to trust technology over tradition, industry over nature, complexity over simplicity. A tree that does everything can feel too simple to be taken seriously, even when it works. It's not about suppression, it's about fit. The deeper insight is this: Moringa wasn't necessarily removed. It simply doesn't fit well into systems designed for scale, control, standardization, profit optimization, so it remains underutilized, fragmented, regionally applied. The real insight: Moringa represents a different kind of solution, one that reduces dependency, one that empowers locally, one that doesn't require constant consumption, and that makes it powerful, but also difficult to integrate into dominant global systems.
How the world chose oil over plants. Up to this point, everything you've seen explains why Moringa works. But understanding the biology is only half the story. The other half is this: why did the world move away from systems like this in the first place? The power of concentration. Plant-based systems, like Moringa, are powerful, but they share one limitation. They are distributed, grown across land, harvested in many locations, processed locally. Now compare that to petroleum. Oil exists in highly concentrated reserves underground. That changes everything, because concentration allows massive extraction, centralized control, industrial-scale processing. One oil field can power entire nations. A forest of trees cannot do that as efficiently. Energy density and industrial demand. As the world industrialized, energy demand exploded. Factories, railways, ships, later automobiles. These systems required high energy density, consistent supply, large-scale distribution. Petroleum met those needs better than plant-based fuels at scale. Not because plants didn't work, but because oil worked faster, denser, and at larger scale. Infrastructure lock-in. Once a system is built, it reinforces itself. With oil, this happened rapidly. Refineries were constructed, pipelines expanded, engines optimized for petroleum fuels. Fuel stations spread across cities. Over time, this created infrastructure lock-in, meaning new technologies must adapt to the system, not the other way around. Plant-based fuels didn't disappear. They simply stopped fitting into the dominant infrastructure. Standardization versus flexibility. Industrial systems favor standardization. Same fuel, same machinery, same processes. Plant-based solutions are more variable, different yields by region, different oil compositions, different processing methods. That flexibility is powerful locally, but difficult globally. Speed of scaling. Oil scaled rapidly because extraction could be increased quickly. Supply chains could be expanded. Investment flowed into a single dominant model. Plant systems scale differently. Require land. Require time to grow. Require distributed labor. So while both are viable, one scaled faster in an industrial context. The trade-off. The world didn't choose oil because plants were useless. It chose oil because it concentrated power. It accelerated growth. It simplified large-scale systems. But that choice came with trade-offs. Dependency on finite resources, environmental impact, centralization of control. The real insight. This wasn't a simple story of better versus worse. It was a shift in priorities, from resilience to efficiency, from local systems to global systems, from diversity to standardization.
Moringa represents the path not taken, not because it failed, but because the world optimized for something else. A middle-aged male voice, professional yet inspiring, with a standard American accent, deep, warm, and resonant. The confident tone of an experienced expert explaining a revolutionary concept. What Moringa still does today. Proven, measured, real. Everything so far might sound historical, even theoretical, but Moringa is not a story of the past. It is still being used right now. Across dozens of countries, in environments where modern systems struggle or fail, this tree continues to do what it has always done. Quietly, consistently, effectively. Water purification, verified by science. Modern research has confirmed what ancient communities practiced intuitively. Moringa seeds contain cationic proteins that bind to bacteria, attach to suspended particles, cause contaminants to clump and settle. Laboratory studies show significant reduction in E. coli, lower turbidity, clearer water, reduced microbial load. In practical terms, one crushed seed can help treat approximately 1 liter of contaminated water. For rural communities, this means no need for chemical treatment, no need for expensive filtration systems, immediate, accessible improvement in water quality. Nutrition, dense, measurable, consistent. Unlike trends or marketing claims, Moringa's nutritional profile is well documented. Per 100 grams of dried leaves, around 25 grams protein, high calcium content, significant iron levels, rich in vitamins A, C, and antioxidants. This makes it particularly valuable in regions facing malnutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, limited food diversity. It doesn't replace all food, but it fills critical gaps. Small-scale energy, localized impact. Each mature moringa tree produces hundreds of seed pods annually, thousands of seeds, several liters of oil per year. While this is not enough for industrial-scale energy, it is enough for small generators, household lighting, cooking fuel in limited settings. This is where Moringa's strength lies, not in replacing global systems, but in supporting local independence. Agricultural support, beyond just food. Moringa is increasingly used in agroforestry systems, soil restoration projects, climate-resilient farming. Farmers use it to improve soil quality, provide animal feed, create natural fertilizers from leaf matter. It becomes part of a larger ecological strategy, not just a single crop. Where it is used today. Moringa grows across India, Philippines, Kenya, Tanzania, Haiti, Nicaragua, and many other tropical regions. In these places, it is not a trend, it is part of daily life, used in cooking, health, and survival. The modern market shift. In recent years, Moringa has entered global markets, sold as powder, packaged as supplements, marketed as a superfood. This creates a paradox. In wealthy countries, it is a premium product. In poorer regions, it is often underutilized or overlooked. The same tree, two completely different roles. The real insight. Moringa does not need to be rediscovered. It was never lost. It was simply never scaled into dominant systems. Yet today, its value is clearer than ever. As a supplement to nutrition, as a tool for water improvement, as a support for resilient agriculture, as a small-scale energy option, not as a miracle, but as a practical, multifunctional resource.
Why something so useful still isn't central to the world. By now, the pattern is clear. Moringa works scientifically, nutritionally, ecologically. So the real question becomes deeper. Why is it still on the margins instead of at the center? Value versus monetization. Moringa creates value in a very specific way. It grows once, produces for years. It reduces the need for external inputs. It can be used directly without complex processing. This creates a problem, not biologically, but economically. Because modern systems are optimized for repeat transactions. You buy fuel repeatedly. You buy fertilizers repeatedly. You invest in infrastructure repeatedly. Moringa disrupts that cycle. Once established, it reduces how often you need to buy in. Infrastructure versus simplicity. Large-scale solutions depend on factories, distribution networks, maintenance systems. These require capital, planning, long-term investment. Moringa requires soil, sunlight, and time. That simplicity makes it powerful, but also harder to integrate into systems designed around complexity. Measurement and standardization. Global systems rely on data that is standardized, predictable, uniform. Moringa behaves differently depending on climate, soil conditions, local practices. This variability makes it harder to standardize at scale, even if it works well locally. Perception and priority. There's also a human factor. People tend to prioritize solutions that feel advanced, technological, engineered. A tree, no matter how useful, can be perceived as too simple to solve complex problems, even when evidence suggests otherwise. How it gets adopted today. Instead of being integrated as a full system solution, moringa is often isolated into one function, nutrition, packaged into products, powder, capsules, marketed in niche industries, wellness, supplements. This allows it to fit into existing economic models without disrupting larger systems. The gap between potential and application. There's a difference between what something can do and how it is actually used. Moringa's full potential includes food, water treatment, energy, soil regeneration, but in practice it is often reduced to a single-purpose product because that is easier to integrate into current structures. The real insight. Moringa is not ignored because it doesn't work. It remains underutilized because it reduces dependency, it resists standardization, it doesn't require continuous consumption, and modern systems are built around the opposite. Final thought for this section. This is not a story about something being hidden. It's a story about what fits into the system and what doesn't. Moringa represents a different model, local over global, regenerative over extractive, continuous supply over repeated purchase. And that difference is what keeps it on the edge, even while it continues to work at the center of nature.
Energy, food, water, and why the problem may be framed wrong. Up to now, moringa has been examined as a plant. But to fully understand its significance, you have to shift perspective. Not just what it does, but what problems it quietly challenges. Because the world today is built around three major crises: energy, food, water. And each one is usually approached the same way. Build bigger systems. The energy problem, scale versus access. Globally, energy discussions focus on power grids, oil production, renewable infrastructure, solar, wind. These are large-scale solutions. They aim to power cities, industries, entire nations. But there's another layer to the problem: access at the local level. Millions of people don't need massive grids. They need light at night, power for small tools, basic energy for daily life. Moringa doesn't solve global energy demand, but it addresses localized energy gaps. The food problem, quantity versus quality. Modern agriculture has largely solved one issue: producing large quantities of food. But another problem remains: nutritional quality. In many regions, calories are available, nutrients are not. This leads to hidden hunger, micronutrient deficiencies, long-term health issues. Moringa directly targets this gap, not by replacing stable crops, but by enhancing nutritional density. The water problem, infrastructure versus immediacy. Water solutions are typically treatment plants, filtration systems, chemical purification. These require investment, maintenance, infrastructure. But in many areas, the problem is immediate. People need cleaner water today. Moringa offers a simple, immediate improvement, a method that works without complex systems. Not perfect, but accessible. A different model of solving problems. Most global solutions follow this path. Centralize, scale, distribute. Moringa represents a different model. Localize, grow, use. This shifts the focus from system-level efficiency to community-level resilience. Complement, not replacement. Here's the critical distinction. Moringa is not designed to replace power grids, industrial agriculture, water infrastructure.
Instead, it complements them. It fills the gaps where systems don't reach. Costs are too high. Access is limited. Small solutions at large scale. Individually, a single tree seems small. But across millions of locations, thousands of villages, millions of households, small solutions can accumulate into large impact. Not through centralization, but through distribution. The real insight. The biggest shift is not technological, it's conceptual. Instead of asking, how do we build bigger systems to solve global problems? Moringa suggests another question. How do we empower smaller systems to solve local ones? Because when local problems are solved at scale, global problems begin to shrink. Final thought for this section. Energy, food, and water are not just technical challenges. They are distribution challenges, access challenges, system design challenges. Moringa doesn't eliminate these problems, but it reveals something important. Some solutions don't need to be invented. They need to be recognized, adapted, and applied differently.
At the beginning, this was about a tree, a fast-growing plant with unusual properties, a natural system that produces food, improves water, and offers energy potential. But now, it should be clear, this was never just about Moringa. A shift in how we see solutions. Modern thinking often assumes complex problems require complex solutions. Technology must lead. Scale must come first. But Moringa challenges that assumption. It shows that simplicity can be powerful. Biology can outperform machinery in certain contexts. Local systems can solve real problems. Efficiency versus resilience. For the past century, the world has optimized for efficiency, speed, scale. These created incredible progress, but they also introduced fragility, dependency, environmental pressure. Moringa represents a different axis. Resilience, survives harsh conditions, requires minimal input, produces consistently over time. It doesn't maximize output, it maximizes continuity. Centralized versus distributed futures. There are two ways to build systems. Centralized, controlled by large networks, highly efficient, vulnerable to disruption. Distributed, spread across many nodes, less efficient individually, more resilient collectively. Moringa fits the second model, not as a replacement, but as a balance. The role of rediscovery. Innovation is often seen as creating something new, but sometimes progress looks different. It looks like rediscovering what already works, ancient practices, local knowledge, biological systems, and integrating them into modern contexts. What changes going forward? The value of Moringa is not that it solves everything, it's that it expands what's possible. It shows that energy doesn't only come from industry, nutrition doesn't only come from supply chains, water solutions don't always require infrastructure. There are alternatives, not perfect, but real. A different kind of power. The most important idea is this. Power doesn't only come from control. It can come from accessibility, simplicity, sustainability. A system that anyone can use can be just as powerful as one controlled at scale. Final insight. Moringa works because it aligns with natural systems. It uses sunlight efficiently. It cycles nutrients continuously. It adapts to stress instead of resisting it. It doesn't fight the environment. It works with it. Final word. The tree is still here, growing quietly in places where systems don't reach, supporting communities without recognition, providing without requiring permission. It hasn't changed, only the world around it has. And maybe the real question is not, why wasn't this used more, but what else have we overlooked because it was too simple?